My husband was on the phone, comforting his mistress. When I handed him the divorce settlement, he didn't even glance at it. He grabbed his Mont Blanc pen and scrawled his signature with a quick, dismissive flick of his wrist. When I sold our Bel Air mansion for $5 million and moved back to my family's estate, my in-laws suddenly left with absolutely nothing, were utterly devastated. Babe, don't be mad. I'll come see you first thing tomorrow. Who cares about that old hag? If my dad hadn't forced me to marry someone of our social standing back then, do you think I'd have even looked at her? I stood perfectly still outside his home office door. The warmth of the matcha latte I had just made him was slowly fading, much like my heart, which was growing colder by the second. Jason's voice slipped through the ajar door. His tone was so sickeningly sweet, it physically hurt a sweetness he hadn't shown me in over 2 years. You're my true love. As soon as I drain her trust fund and assets, I'll divorce her. Fooling her is a piece of cake. She hasn't looked at a single company ledger in years. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the mug. How ironic. I just wanted to bring him a drink. And instead, I overheard the most honest confession he had ever made to me. My distorted reflection trembled on the surface of the green liquid. Sophia Newton, 30 years old. I had become the laughingstock of this house. I retreated silently, leaving the mug on the hallway console, and walked back to our master bedroom. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I didn't shed a single tear. They say when pain reaches its absolute peak, the tears dry up. I stared at my reflection in the vanity mirror. My skin was still smooth, but fine lines were already forming around my eyes. I forced a smile. The woman in the mirror smiled back, but her grimace was more tragic than any crying fit. 10 years of marriage, completely betrayed. I reached into the bottom of a drawer and pulled out the paperwork I already had prepared. The cold, smooth touch of the paper grounded me. It was a divorce settlement I had drafted and revised countless times over the last 3 months. Every clause meticulously reviewed by my lawyer. Jason didn't know that the wife he thought was so easy to manipulate was no longer the naive girl who had once risked everything for love. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the papers and a pen and headed to the study. My footsteps were silent, absorbed by the thick plush carpet, much like all the sorrow I had swallowed over the years. Through the door, I could still hear Jason consoling his young mistress. Did you like the jewelry set I got you? It's way better than any of Sophia's. Of course, you're so much prettier than she is. I pushed the door wide open. Jason spun around, startled. The phone was still pressed to his ear, and the syrupy expression on his face instantly froze. He hung up hurriedly and forced a smile. Sophia, why didn't you knock? If I had knocked, I would have missed such a beautiful confession, I said calmly, spreading the divorce agreement across his mahogany desk. Sign. His expression shifted from surprise to confusion, and finally to a strange sense of relief. What is this? The divorce agreement. Exactly what you were planning. I'm just saving you the trouble of having to steal my assets first. Jason glanced at the papers and let out a laugh. Sophia, I think you misunderstood. She's just a client. Sometimes you have to flatter them. Lauren Foster, 25 years old. Former receptionist at your firm, recently promoted to your personal executive assistant. I recited smoothly. You've been together for 2 years and 3 months. Last month, you even bought her a condo in West Hollywood under the company's name. By the way, since California is a community property state, I have every right to claim half of that. Jason's face drained of color. You've been investigating me? I've just been protecting my legal rights. I offered him the pen. Sign it while I'm still willing to end this amicably. He stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly smirked as if this were all a joke. He took the pen and signed with his usual elegant, flowing script, not even bothering to read the contents. Aren't you going to read the clauses? I reminded him politely. What's there to look at? He tossed the folder back at me with staggering indifference. You can't live without me anyway. You'll end up begging me to get back together. Sophia, a spoiled rich girl like you, is nothing outside of our family's influence. I picked up the agreement and offered a faint smile. Thank you for your cooperation, Jason. I hope you and your executive assistant will be very happy. As I turned to leave, he called out behind me. Stop acting crazy. You know tomorrow is my mother's birthday, right? Don't forget to pick up the catering. I didn't turn around. I just closed the door silently. Back in the bedroom, I locked the door. That was when my body finally began to tremble. 10 years of marriage. Over just like that. I thought I would break down, that I would cry oceans. But strangely, I only felt an immense, overwhelming sense of liberation. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jason. "Stop overreacting. Tomorrow we are going to my mom's house for lunch together." I didn't reply. Instead, I called my lawyer. "Mr. Allen?" "It's signed." Yes, without him even reading it. "Perfect. I'll see you tomorrow morning." After hanging up, I opened the safe and pulled out a thick folder. It contained all the evidence I had gathered over the last 2 years. Hotel receipts, bank statements, recorded phone calls. I ran my fingers over the pages, remembering Jason proposing to me under the cherry blossoms at the Botanical Gardens 7 years ago. The love in his eyes had seemed so real. How did we end up here? In college, Jason was the student body president, brilliant and charismatic. He courted me for 2 years. I came from the family that owned Solaria Incorporated, and my father was a renowned billionaire developer. Jason came from a family with deep ties to local politics and real estate. On paper, we were the perfect match. My father had warned me that the Miller family was complicated, but blinded by love, I insisted it was him or nobody. The first 2 years of marriage were sweet, until my father's company hit a rough patch. My in-laws' attitude shifted overnight. My mother-in-law started criticizing me for acting like an entitled heiress, and Jason became increasingly distant not because of work, but out of sheer indifference. I opened my phone's gallery and found a family photo from last year. Such a harmonious picture. Me, elegant and serene. Jason, handsome and distinguished. My in-laws smiling warmly. Who would have guessed that the very afternoon we took that photo, Jason drove off to meet Lauren Foster. Outside, it had grown dark. I got up and started packing a small suitcase. I would leave first thing in the morning. This Bel Air mansion was in my name. It was a wedding gift from my father. After the divorce, it would remain mine. Thinking about the look on Jason's face when he discovered the truth brought me a certain thrill. My phone rang again. It was my mother-in-law. "Sophia, don't forget to pick up the dry-aged prime rib roast from that famous butcher in Beverly Hills tomorrow. Your father-in-law loves it." "Yes, Mrs. Miller," I replied. Tomorrow was going to be an incredibly interesting day. When the morning light spilled through the curtains, I felt disoriented for a second, as if I were still in that sweet, self-induced dream where my husband loved me, our marriage was happy, and my life was perfect. Then I saw the signed divorce agreement on the nightstand. I sat up straight. My fingers brushed Jason's extravagant signature. The ink was dry, just like the love between us. My phone lit up. 7:15 a.m. 3 missed calls and 5 texts, all from Jason. I swiped the screen. The last message was sent 10 minutes ago. "I don't remember what I said last night. I was drunk. Stop being mad. Today is Mom's birthday. I'll pick you up at 10. I let out a bitter laugh and tossed the phone aside. Classic Jason strategy. Pretend he was blackout drunk, act like nothing happened. I had seen this tactic a million times. The woman in the mirror had slight dark circles, but her gaze was strikingly clear. I splashed cold water on my face, letting the chill sink into my bones. As of today, I was no longer the Miller family's obedient daughter-in-law, nor an appendage to Jason. I was Sophia Newton again. My suitcase was open on the bed. I only packed the essentials and my valuables. I'd have plenty of time to deal with the rest once I regained full possession of the house. Jason thought I couldn't live without him? He was about to find out how horribly wrong he was. At exactly 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw Emily's familiar face. She was wearing an impeccable power suit and holding 2 iced Americanos. "Well, did the bastard sign it?" she asked impatiently the second I opened the door, her eyes gleaming like a fox spotting its prey. I nodded and pulled the agreement from my bag. Signed without even looking. Emily quickly scanned the papers, a wicked smile spreading across her lips. Perfect. This idiot has no idea what he just signed. She pointed to a clause on the last page. Look here. He agrees to waive all rights to the Bel Air property and all assets contained within it. This house is entirely yours now. He still thinks it's in his name. It's always been in mine. But since he paid the HOA fees and utility bills since we got married, he assumed he owned it. I took a sip of the coffee she brought me. A subtle sweetness broke through the bitterness. Emily laughed so hard she almost choked on her drink. Oh my God, I would pay to see his face when he finds out. She set her cup down and grew serious. Sophia, are you sure about this? Once you file this at the courthouse, there's no turning back. Turning back? I walked over to the window and looked at the blooming rose bushes in the garden, the ones Jason had planted for me early in our marriage. That door closed 2 years ago. The first time he cheated on me. Emily sighed and pulled a manila envelope from her designer tote. Then you'll need this. I opened it. Inside was a stack of photographs and several bank statements. In the photos, Jason was affectionately hugging a young woman in various locations: a high-end restaurant, a hotel entrance, even the AMC theater we used to frequent. The woman looked to be in her early 20s, with long hair and doe eyes. It was Lauren Foster. On your birthday, he said he had a corporate emergency and had to leave. He actually took that girl to Cabo, Emily said, pointing to a photo with a background of blue ocean and sky, paid for using your joint account. I reviewed the bank statements. My fingers trembled slightly, not from sadness, but from pure rage. Jason had used our money to buy Lauren designer bags, pay her rent, and even fund the opening of a boutique coffee shop. Thank you, Emily. I tucked the documents away. This will be very useful. We've been best friends for 10 years, don't mention it. Ever since college, I knew Jason wasn't right for you. If you hadn't been so crazy in love back then, I shook my head, cutting her off. The Sophia from back then was too naive. The Sophia now just wants to take back what is hers. As we spoke, we heard the sound of the front door unlocking. Emily and I exchanged a glance. She quickly shoved the papers back into her bag. Jason walked in, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit. He looked visibly surprised to see Emily, but immediately plastered on his usual fake smile. Emily, what a surprise. You could have called ahead. I didn't realize I needed to report to you to visit my best friend, Emily shot back, not yielding an inch. Jason frowned and turned to me. Sophia, are you ready? Mom just called again, rushing us. I'm not going, I said, calmly finishing the last sip of my Americano. Excuse me? Jason's face darkened. Stop joking around. I apologized for last night. Last night? I feigned ignorance. Oh, you mean when you called me an old hag and bragged about plotting to steal my trust fund? Jason's face turned tomato red. He glanced nervously at Emily and lowered his voice. Let's talk about this in private. Not necessary. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the voice memo. Jason's voice rang out crystal clear. Who cares about that old hag? If my dad hadn't forced me to marry someone of our social standing back then, do you think I'd have even looked at her? Jason went from red to ghost white. He tried to snatch the phone, but Emily stepped in his way. Mr. Miller, are you planning to lay a hand on her? Sophia, you recorded me? Jason stared at me in disbelief. When did you become like this? Right around the time I stopped believing your lies and learned to defend myself. Jason took a deep breath and recovered his arrogant posture. Sophia, those were just words to keep a client happy. You know the business world is a war zone. Sometimes you have no choice. No choice but to sleep with her, buy her a condo in West Hollywood, and take her on luxury vacations to Mexico using our joint account? With every word, I took a step toward him. Jason backed up. Do you think I'm still the little girl who falls to her knees for a few sweet words? He was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by my momentum. I took the opportunity to pull out a copy of the divorce agreement. You've already signed it, so let's end this farce. According to the agreement, this mansion is mine, and the rest of the marital assets are split down the middle. I smiled maliciously. Of course, if you insist on dragging this through family court, I have no problem presenting the matter of Miss Foster and these photos to a judge. Seeing the photos, Jason finally showed signs of panic. You've been investigating me? Right back at you. You've been digging into my father's corporate financials, haven't you? That sentence struck a nerve. His expression turned feral. So this was your plan all along, Sophia. You think you can take a chunk of my family's empire with a divorce? Keep dreaming. I have no interest in your family's empire, I said evenly. I just want my share back. Jason let out a cold laugh. Your share? What do you have? This house is in my name. The Range Rover was bought by me. You don't even have a job. I couldn't help but laugh. Jason, it's obvious you never actually looked at the property deed. This house was a wedding gift from my father. It has always been solely in my name. And as for a job, I pulled a sleek business card from a drawer. I am a shareholder and financial advisor for Solaria Incorporated. My base salary is $150,000, not as much as yours, but plenty to live on my own. Jason froze as if he'd been punched in the gut. Of course, he knew nothing of this. After we married, he demanded I be a stay-at-home wife. He claimed it was so I could live comfortably, but in reality, it was to isolate me from the outside world. Now, please get out of my house. I pointed to the door. Next Monday, a moving company will come to collect your things. Have them packed. Jason's face shifted colors several times before he finally let out a curse and stormed out, slamming the door. The room fell instantly silent. Emily and I let out a long sigh in unison. What a relief, Emily cheered, clapping her hands. He looked like he swallowed a lemon. A sudden wave of exhaustion hit me, and I sank onto the sofa. 10 years of feelings. Ended just like that. It wasn't that I felt no nostalgia, but reason dictated this marriage should have died long ago. So, what now? Emily asked, sitting next to me and handing me a glass of water. First, meet with my lawyer to file the agreement with the court and start liquidating the assets. Jason has definitely hidden funds. I need to find them. Do you need me to help with anything? Actually, yes. I looked at her with gratitude. But right now, I have something more pressing. What? I pointed to my walk-in closet. Help me pick out a dress. I have to go to my mother-in-law's birthday party at 10. Emily's eyes widened comically. Are you insane? After the nuclear bomb you just dropped, you're going to his mother's house? Exactly why I have to go. I stood up and walked into the closet. I'm going to announce the divorce in front of everyone. I won't give the Miller family the chance to spin the narrative and invent rumors. Emily gasped. That is a full-blown declaration of war. No. I pulled out a striking black designer dress. It's the end of the war. While I was changing, my phone rang again. It was my mother-in-law. I put it on speaker. Sophia, did you get the prime rib? Jason just told me you weren't feeling well. Her shrill voice was accompanied by a loud background hum, indicating the party was already in full swing. It's picked up, Mrs. Miller. My voice sounded perfectly normal. I'm fine, just a slight headache. I'll be there shortly. Ah, good. And dress appropriately. We have very important guests today. She paused and lowered her voice. The wife of the city planning director, Mrs. Evans, is here. Mingle with her. Jason has a major development project waiting on her husband's approval. I barely suppressed a bitter laugh. Yes, Mrs. Miller. When I hung up, Emily stared at me in awe. Are you seriously going to deliver the roast to them? Of course. I smiled faintly. The final act needs to be memorable. Sophia, I never knew you were so terrifying. I'm not terrifying. I looked in the mirror as I applied a deep, bold red lipstick. I've just woken up. The woman in the mirror wore a flawless black dress. Her lips were blood red, her gaze sharp as a scalpel. This was the real Sophia Newton, not the Miller family's quiet daughter-in-law, not Jason's accessory. The heiress of Solaria Incorporated, a phoenix rising from the ashes. The Miller family thought I would leave crying with empty hands? Let them wait and see. The show had just begun. The prime rib from the famous butcher came in a massive, exquisite, insulated carrying case, giving off a mouth-watering aroma. I stood holding it in front of my in-laws' sprawling Beverly Hills estate, taking a deep breath. This would probably be the last time I entered through this door. I rang the bell. Martha, the head housekeeper, opened the door. Her face lit up when she saw me. Mrs. Miller, so good to see you. Mr. Miller was just looking for you. Happy birthday, Martha. I slipped a small envelope into her hand. It was her birthday, too. The Miller family never cared about the staff's personal lives. But I remembered every year. Martha's eyes welled up, and she tried to decline. But my mother-in-law's piercing voice echoed from the grand living room. Is that Sophia? Tell her to come in. All the guests are seated. I gestured for Martha to keep the envelope and walked into the dining hall holding the massive roast. The room was vast and bright. Underneath a massive crystal chandelier, 3 large tables were filled with Miller relatives and high-status guests. My father-in-law was seated at the head of the main table, chatting up city planning director Evans. My mother-in-law fluttered around the room like a social butterfly. Jason was seated near his father, an empty chair beside him clearly reserved for me. When he saw me, his eyes darkened. He quickly walked over and hissed in my ear, "I didn't think you'd actually show up. Why are you here? Your mother specifically asked me to bring the prime rib." "How could I miss it?" I said, smiling and raising my voice slightly. My mother-in-law approached, beaming as she took the catering case from my hands. "Our Sophia is always so thoughtful." She turned to the guests. "My daughter-in-law knows exactly how to take care of her family." The guests responded with polite applause and compliments, praising the Millers' good fortune. I noticed Jason's jaw clenching tighter by the second. "Come, sit here." My mother-in-law grabbed my hand and pulled me to the seat next to Jason. "Mrs. Evans has been dying to chat with you." I sat obediently and nodded at Mrs. Evans across the table. She was an elegant woman in her 50s, very well preserved, with highly perceptive eyes. She observed me thoughtfully. "Sophia, you look wonderful. I heard your father's new commercial development in Miami is proceeding swimmingly." My mother-in-law's smile froze slightly. It was an open secret that my father and the Millers were fierce real estate rivals. "Thankfully, everything is going perfectly," I replied politely. "My father always says that in business, one must be prudent and never covet what doesn't belong to them." It was a pointed jab at several of the aggressively hostile acquisitions the Millers had undertaken lately. A faint smile reached Mrs. Evans's eyes. But my father-in-law's face visibly darkened. Under the table, Jason pinched my thigh hard. Without flinching, I slowly reached into my designer bag and pulled out a pristine copy of the divorce agreement. I placed it on the Lazy Susan in the center of the massive table and gave it a gentle push. "Since we are all gathered here today, I have an announcement to make." The document spun slowly and stopped directly in front of the head of the table. My mother-in-law picked it up, confused. After a quick glance, the blood drained from her face. "What is this? A divorce settlement?" "Yes." Jason signed it yesterday. The dining room plunged into a deathly silence. Every eye locked onto Jason and me. Jason leaped up, his chair scraping violently against the marble floor. "Sophia, what are you doing?" Still seated, I looked him up and down. "Didn't you say yourself that Lauren Foster is your true love and I'm just an old hag?" "Nonsense!" my mother-in-law shrieked. "My Jason would never say such a thing." I pulled out my phone and hit play. Jason's voice echoed with brutal clarity across the silent dining room. "Who cares about that old hag? If my dad hadn't forced me to marry someone of our social standing back then, do you think I'd have even looked at her?" When the recording ended, a collective gasp swept through the room. Jason's face went from red to white to a sickly green. My mother-in-law snatched the agreement from her husband's hands, her voice trembling. "This is impossible. How could Jason sign this? The Bel Air house is yours? By what right?" "Because the deed is in my name," I said, standing up. "The house was a wedding gift from my father. It has always been in my name." "Liar!" My mother-in-law completely dropped her high society facade. "That is our family's home. Jason paid for the renovations and all the bills for 10 years. "Mrs. Miller," I used the formal address deliberately. "Don't tell me you don't know that expenses paid from marital joint accounts cannot be uniquely claimed by one party after a divorce. It's basic California family law." My father-in-law slammed his hand on the table. "Enough." He glared at Jason with absolute fury. "What is the meaning of this?" Jason stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. I answered for him. "Mr. Miller, Jason has been seeing Miss Lauren Foster for over 2 years. He bought her a luxury condo, funded her coffee shop, and took her to Cabo, all with money from our joint accounts." I pulled out the photos Emily had given me and scattered them across the table. "Yesterday, when I handed him the papers, he signed without reading. I suppose he was in a rush to bring her into the family." The photos were passed around among the horrified guests. Mrs. Evans picked one up and murmured dryly, "Mr. Miller, your son certainly has an eye. The girl is quite pretty." My father-in-law looked ready to have a stroke. My mother-in-law lunged at me like a wild animal. "You bitch, you trapped my son." I stepped aside effortlessly. She tripped and nearly fell. Jason caught her and screamed at me. "Sophia, you tricked me!" "Tricked you?" I laughed coldly. "You were the one so desperate to divorce me that you signed without reading." Now you're panicking because you found out the mansion isn't yours. Everybody shut up! My father-in-law's roar silenced the room. He took a deep breath, suppressing his rage, and turned to the guests. I apologize. A private family matter has ruined the afternoon. I will host you all another day to make up for it. It was an eviction notice. The guests awkwardly stood up and said their goodbyes. Only Mrs. Evans, before leaving, looked at me pointedly and whispered, "If you need anything, call me." Once the outsiders were gone, my father-in-law grabbed Jason by his custom lapels. "You idiot! How could you sign without reading?" "Dad, I didn't know she recorded me," Jason stammered. "The problem isn't the recording," his father roared. "The problem is you got caught and humiliated us." My mother-in-law rushed at me, practically digging her nails into the air near my face. "You ungrateful brat. We supported you for 10 years and this is how you repay us?" "Supported me?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Have you forgotten the $2 million dowry my father infused into your company when we married? Have you forgotten how much I've smoothed over for your family using my connections?" I turned to my father-in-law. "Mr. Miller, who helped you with that downtown zoning permit 2 years ago? The rezoning approval?" My father-in-law's gaze faltered. He remembered clearly. I had resolved it through a college friend's father who worked in the state legislature. "Well, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. "My lawyer will contact Jason for the remaining logistics. You think you're just going to walk out of here?" Jason ran to block my path. "The agreement is already notarized. My lawyer filed it this morning. By the way, according to Clause 7, you have 10 days to vacate the Bel Air house." My mother-in-law screamed hysterically, "In your dreams! That house is ours. Then I'll see you in court." I shoved Jason aside. "Although I don't think Miss Foster will like having your affair splashed across the tabloids." That sentence threw a bucket of ice water over the family. My father-in-law was the first to regain his composure. He pulled his furious wife and son back and looked at me darkly. "Sophia, we are family. Why take it this far? If you have conditions, we can negotiate." "It's too late, Mr. Miller," I smiled. "The conditions are in the agreement. The house is mine. The rest of the marital assets are split 50/50. Perfectly fair." "Fair?" my mother-in-law screeched. "You won't get a single dime from this family." I didn't bother arguing. I walked straight out the door. Behind me, I heard my father-in-law yelling, my mother-in-law sobbing, and the sound of Jason smashing something fragile. Martha stood by the front door with tears in her eyes and silently handed me an umbrella. "It started to rain, ma'am." "Thank you, Martha. Take care of yourself," I said softly. Stepping out, the California rain was surprisingly heavy. I didn't open the umbrella, letting the cold drops hit my face, mixing with my hot tears. 10 years, gone. It hurt, yes, but the overwhelming feeling was freedom. My phone vibrated in my bag. "Emily. How'd it go? Are you alive?" I texted back. "Yes." Then I dialed another number. "Detective Reynolds? It's me." "Yes. You can begin the deep dive investigation, especially into the Miller Holdings financial transactions over the last 2 years, as soon as possible." After hanging up, I hailed an Uber Black. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Where to, miss?" I thought for a moment. "To the Solaria Incorporated headquarters in Century City, please." It was time to go home. An hour later, I was sitting in my father's massive corner office, holding a mug of hot tea. My body was still trembling slightly. My father stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to me, listening to my story in silence. "Are you truly prepared to go all the way with this?" he finally asked, his voice deep and grave. "Dad, I have no other choice." I gripped the mug. Jason didn't just betray me once. He's been doing it for years. His family never considered me one of their own. My father turned around. The sharp, predatory glint I knew so well shone in his eyes. "I'm not asking you to back down. I'm asking if you're ready for total war. The Millers won't make this easy." I put the mug down and stood up to meet his gaze. "I have proof of his infidelity and a signed divorce agreement. The house is in my name. They can't take it. That's just the tip of the iceberg." My father walked to his desk and pulled out a file. There are rumors in the industry that the Miller Group is facing severe liquidity issues. It's highly probable they've been embezzling corporate funds. I took the file and skimmed it. They were the accounting ledgers for a textile manufacturing plant we co-owned. Yes, nominally it's your factory, my father said, pointing to some glaring discrepancies. The destination of these funds is completely opaque. I suspect the Millers have been siphoning it. My hands began to shake. That factory was part of my dowry, but the Miller family had managed its daily operations. If they were embezzling, I'll investigate this thoroughly. Dad, I need your help. My father placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. The entire Solaria board stands behind you. He paused. But be careful. A cornered animal is deadly. The Millers are not a simple enemy. I nodded. I already had a plan. First, liquidate all joint assets. Second, find proof of Jason's embezzlement. Third, my phone rang. It was Jason. I declined the call. Immediately, a text popped up. You think you've won? Just wait. I'll make you get on your knees and beg me to take you back. I smiled coldly and replied, Don't forget to vacate the house in 10 days. Otherwise, I'll see you in court. I blocked his number. The war had just begun, and this time, I would show no mercy. The Miller Holdings Tower loomed impressively in the heart of downtown LA. Its 35 floors of glass curtain walls gleamed in the sunlight. I stood across the street, staring at the building that was once tangentially my domain. A lump formed in my throat. I hadn't set foot in there in 7 years. Ever since Jason took over as CEO, he insisted the corporate world was a man's battlefield and I just needed to look pretty at home. Now I realized it was just a convenient excuse to lock me out of the family finances. I took a deep breath, adjusted the collar of my designer blazer, and walked in. I purposely wore a pristine black power suit, my hair pulled into a sleek high ponytail, my makeup flawless. I wanted the Miller employees to see that Sophia Newton was no longer a docile housewife. The receptionist was new. She gave me a professional smile. Good morning. Do you have an appointment? No appointment, I said evenly. I am Sophia Newton, Jason Miller's wife. I'm here to see the Chief Financial Officer, Isabella Taylor. The receptionist's expression shifted instantly. A flicker of panic crossed her eyes. Yes, Mrs. Miller. I'll notify the CFO right away. She picked up the phone and whispered hurriedly, glancing at me repeatedly. It was obvious my bold move at the birthday party was already the hottest gossip in the building. In less than 5 minutes, the elevator doors opened, and a tall woman walked out briskly. She looked to be in her late 30s, wearing a simple gray suit and gold-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Miller, she extended her hand. I'm Isabella Taylor, CFO. To what do we owe the pleasure? Please, call me Sophia. I shook her hand. It was cold and firm. I'll be dropping the Miller very soon. The corners of Isabella's mouth twitched, as if suppressing a smirk. Miss Newton. Right this way. We rode the elevator alone in silence. I watched Isabella's reflection in the brushed steel doors. She stood perfectly straight, but her fingers unconsciously tapping against her leather portfolio betrayed her nerves. How long have you been working here? I broke the silence. 10 years, 4 months, she replied quickly, since Mr. Miller took over as CEO. Then you must be very familiar with the company's financial health. Isabella turned to me, her eyes guarded behind her glasses. Miss Newton, what exactly is the purpose of your visit? Just a routine check, I smiled. After all, given the impending divorce, I need to untangle my financial ties with the Miller family. We reached the 28th floor. Isabella guided me through the open plan office. Dozens of eyes snapped toward us, and whispers rippled through the cubicles. I walked with my head held high, ignoring murmurs of, "Is that her?" And "Wow, she's brave." Isabella's office was a glass cube. The blinds were half drawn. She closed the door, shut the blinds completely, and gestured for me to sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Sparkling water? No, thank you. I cut to the chase. Isabella, I'd like to see the financial reports from the last 2 years for the manufacturing plant that Mr. Miller and I co-own. Her fingers tapped on her mahogany desk. That requires Mr. Miller's direct authorization. Legally, I have the right to review the status of my own assets. I pulled a document from my bag. Here is the stock certificate and a copy of my ID. 51% of that plant's shares are in my name. Isabella examined the paperwork, looking troubled. Miss Newton, I understand your request, but the company has strict protocols. Isabella. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You know Mr. Miller is having an affair, right? She jumped slightly, her eyes darting to the door. I am just the CFO. I have no interest in the CEO's private life. But you do have an interest in the company's financial legality, don't you? I locked eyes with her. Especially when the CEO is embezzling corporate funds to bankroll his mistress. Isabella's pupils dilated. Her breathing hitched. Miss Newton, that is a severely serious accusation. That's exactly why I'm here. I leaned back. You've been here 10 years. You know right from wrong. If there really is a massive discrepancy in the ledgers, do you think you'll walk away clean when the feds come knocking? The air in the office seemed to freeze. Isabella took off her glasses and wiped them with her microfiber cloth, a classic stalling tactic. When she put them back on, her face was resolute. Miss Newton, there are indeed irregularities in the plant's books. But I need to protect myself. I understand. I nodded. Let's do this. Give me a secure way to contact you. When you're ready to talk, call me. Isabella hesitated, then pulled a business card from her drawer, scribbled a number on the back, and handed it to me. This is my personal burner line. Use it discreetly. I tucked the card away and stood up. Thank you for your time, Isabella. I hope we can speak again soon. As I left the finance department, I caught a young employee hiding behind her monitor, snapping a photo of me on her iPhone. I gave her a polite smile. She flinched and dropped her phone. The entire Miller Group was waiting to see how this divorce war would end. I reached the lobby. Just as I was about to walk out, my phone rang. It was the Bel Air HOA security gate. Miss Newton, apologies for the interruption. A Mr. Miller just tried to enter your property with a young woman. He claims he has your permission, but we denied them entry based on your new directives. My heart pounded. I'm heading there right now. 20 minutes later, I pulled up to the mansion. Parked out front was a cherry red Porsche 911, the new car Jason bought last month, supposedly under the company. The security manager hurried over, looking stressed. Miss Newton, they insisted on going inside. He used his old passcode. Don't worry, I'll handle it. I gave him a reassuring nod and walked to the door. My hands were shaking slightly as I punched in my master code. Opening the door, I immediately heard a woman's laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes coming from the living room. I followed the sound. Jason and Lauren Foster were lounging on the patio, drinking Dom Perignon. Lauren was actually wearing one of my expensive silk robes. Ah, you're here. Jason didn't look the least bit embarrassed. Instead, he looked smug. Just in time. Meet Lauren, my girlfriend. Lauren leaned lazily against Jason, giving me a provocative up and down look. She was undeniably pretty fair skin, big doe eyes, trendy ash blonde hair. The robe she was wearing was one I bought last month and had barely worn. Jason, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. According to the agreement, this house is my private property. Bringing unauthorized guests is trespassing. Trespassing? Jason laughed loudly. Wake up, Sophia. This house is mine. I paid the HOA and the bills. I'm calling the LAPD, I said calmly. Lauren pouted and cooed in her syrupy voice. Jason, babe, didn't you say this old hag wouldn't dare defy you? Jason's face darkened. He stood up and marched toward me. Sophia, listen to me carefully. Lauren likes this house, so she's going to live here. You can leave the easy way. If not, what? I stared dead into his eyes. Are you going to hit me? Jason raised his hand. I instantly whipped out my phone, camera aimed at his face. Hit me. I'll record it and send it to the LAPD and TMZ. Miller Holdings CEO assaults wife. How's that for a headline? His hand stopped in midair. He clenched his fist and lowered it. Get out. This is my house. It's not. I walked past I came to collect some documents. Once I have them, I'll leave. You two keep enjoying yourselves. I purposely lingered in the study, turning on my phone's voice recorder while pretending to dig through files. Just as I expected, Jason and Lauren started arguing on the patio. Why is that bitch so arrogant? Didn't you say she did whatever you told her? Lauren whined. Babe, calm down, Jason soothed. This house will be ours soon. My dad's lawyers are already on it. That agreement is void. And the diamond ring I promised you? The trip to Europe? As soon as the company secures this new bank loan, I'll buy you whatever you want. Her dad's company is struggling. They're practically begging us for help. I quietly slipped out of the study, snapping a few photos of their cozy scene, then coughed loudly. They sprang apart. Lauren clung to Jason's arm, glaring at me. Did you find your papers? Jason sneered. I did. I waved a USB drive I had grabbed. Oh, I almost forgot. I had security cameras installed in the living room and study yesterday. Just in case. Jason's face contorted. What? When? Yesterday, I smiled sweetly. To prevent burglars. Leaving the house, my palms were sweaty, but my mind was laser-focused. Today's harvest was bountiful. Isabella's contact, the recordings and photos of Jason and Lauren, and the intel about the bank loan and his delusions about my father's company. As I got into my car, my dad called. Sophia, where are you? Just leaving Bel Air, heading back to my apartment. Come to my office immediately. I have urgent news. His voice was unusually grim. I whipped the car around. 30 minutes later, I was sitting on my father's leather sofa, watching him pace. Dad, what's wrong? He stopped, frowning deeply. I just got a tip. The Millers are pulling strings with several major banks to force the liquidation of the manufacturing plant in your name. What? I jumped up. On what grounds? Claiming severe mismanagement and undercapitalization. My father handed me a heavy dossier. This is the report they drafted. I skimmed it, my blood running cold. The report claimed the factory had been hemorrhaging money for 2 consecutive years, drowning in debt. It even included minutes from a shareholder meeting, a meeting that I, the majority shareholder, had never attended. These numbers are completely forged, I said, my hands shaking. The plant has always been profitable. We expanded the production line just last quarter. My father nodded. I know. But since they control the corporate seal and the accounting department, they can cook the books. I sank back into the sofa. Suddenly, it all made sense. Jason's arrogance today. They had this planned from the start. They didn't just want my house. They wanted to cannibalize my factory. Dad, what do we do? He sat beside me and took my hand. First, don't panic. The Millers think you're still the compliant girl they can manipulate. They are dead wrong. A fierce, protective light flared in his eyes. My daughter doesn't break easily. You said you made contact with their CFO, Isabella Taylor? Yes, she hinted at cooked books but was too scared to speak on the record. I'll have my people reach out to her, my father said thoughtfully. If we can flip her, we win. I pulled out my phone. I also got these. I showed him the photos of Jason and Lauren. My father looked at the photos and chuckled darkly. Wow. Jason's taste has really plummeted. She looks cheap, Dad, I sighed, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Now is not the time to critique his taste in women. Sophia, my father turned dead serious. There is something I never told you. When you first started dating Jason, I looked deep into his family. Their business tactics aren't just cutthroat, they're filthy. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? My father walked to his wall safe, punched in the code, and pulled out a yellowed file. 7 years ago, the Millers' biggest competitor, a Mr. Sterling, died suddenly in a car crash on the PCH. The Millers acquired his company for pennies on the dollar weeks later. The LAPD ruled it a tragic accident, but I've always had my doubts. I took the file. It contained gruesome crash site photos and old LA Times clippings. Sterling's car had gone off a cliff in Malibu, bursting into flames. Dad. Are you saying they murdered him? It's just a theory, my father sighed. But the Millers will do anything for money. Now that you've openly declared war, you must be extremely careful. I gripped the folder, a chill running down my spine. Did Jason know I had this? Would he hurt me to protect his wealth? I'll be careful, I stood up. Dad, I need a team of ruthless litigators and a private investigator. Already on it. Attorney Allen and his team will be here tomorrow at 10 a.m. As for the PI, he handed me a card. Detective Reynolds. Ex-LAPD. Completely trustworthy. I pocketed the card. A sudden thought hit me. Dad, you said the Millers were pulling strings with banks. Which banks? He listed a few. One name jumped out at me. It was the regional bank where Lauren Foster's father was a vice president. The puzzle pieces snapped together. Jason wasn't just sleeping with Lauren because she was young and pretty. He was using her to secure fraudulent, high-risk loans through her father. And cannibalizing my factory was likely the collateral they needed. By the time I left my father's office, the LA skyline was glowing in the twilight. The divorce was no longer just about a broken heart. It involved millions of dollars, corporate espionage, and potentially murder. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Miss Newton, meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Blue Bottle Coffee in Santa Monica. Regarding the plant's ledgers. It was Isabella. She had finally chosen a side. I replied confirmed and dialed Detective Reynolds. The gloves were off. The Blue Bottle Coffee in Santa Monica was tucked away on a quiet street. At 10 a.m., it was mostly empty. I chose a booth in the far back, facing the door. At 10:05, Isabella walked in briskly. She wasn't in a suit today. She wore a gray hoodie, jeans, and thick-rimmed glasses. She looked like a UCLA grad student. If she hadn't walked straight to my table, I wouldn't have recognized her. Sorry. I took a few detours, she muttered, dropping a heavy messenger bag onto the seat. Making sure I wasn't followed, I pushed an iced matcha latte toward her. Relax. We're safe here. Isabella took a sip. Her fingers were trembling. Miss Newton, I am taking an insane risk meeting you. I know, and I appreciate it. I looked her in the eye. You've decided to tell the truth. Isabella took a deep breath, pulled a massive manila envelope from her bag, and slid it across the table. These are the real accounting books for the plant. The actual ledgers from the last 2 years are wildly different from the sanitized version they showed you. I opened the envelope. Columns of numbers blurred my vision. But even without a CPA, the fraud was obvious. The real books showed consistent, heavy profits. They've been keeping 2 sets of books, I whispered. Not just that, Isabella leaned in. Mr. Miller has siphoned nearly $20 million from the plant into a shell company based in Delaware, entirely controlled by Miller Holdings. They forged the loss reports to force a bankruptcy declaration. My fingers dug into the paper. That is a federal crime. There's more. She smelled faintly of jasmine perfume. Miller Holdings has been cooking its own books for 2 years, inflating quarterly earnings to secure massive commercial loans. Lauren Foster's father, the bank VP, facilitated multiple illegal loans. A cold smile touched Isabella's lips. Mr. Miller never makes a move that doesn't benefit him. How else does a simple receptionist become an executive assistant in 6 months, complete with a luxury West Hollywood condo and a Porsche? I flipped to the last page and saw a handwritten string of alphanumeric characters. What's this? The routing and account numbers for the Delaware Shell Company, Isabella whispered. I dug it up using my admin privileges. The entire money trail is there. I looked up at her. She had a fine sheen of sweat on her forehead. Why are you helping me? This is incredibly dangerous for you. Isabella was quiet for a moment. She took off her glasses and wiped them. I've worked for the Millers for 10 years. I climbed from junior accountant to CFO. And you know how they treat me? She smiled bitterly. Last year, I was diagnosed with a tumor. I asked for a month of medical leave. Mr. Miller told me I either came back in a week or I didn't come back at all. She put her glasses back on. A fierce light burned in her eyes. Plus, I am a financial professional. Cooking books violates everything I stand for. When the Miller empire inevitably implodes, as CFO, I'll be the first one the FBI throws in federal prison. I reached across the table and squeezed her cold hand. Thank you, Isabella. You won't face this alone. What's your next move? First, secure the plant. I packed the documents into my bag. Then, make the Millers pay for every single thing they've done. Isabella nodded and pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. There's more evidence here. Internal emails between Mr. Miller and the bank executives. Keep it safe. Just as I reached for it, the coffee shop door swung open. A hulking man in a black suit stepped inside. Isabella stiffened instantly. Do you know him? I asked quietly. It's the head of Miller Corporate Security. Mike Rollins, she said through gritted teeth. Rollins scanned the room. I pretended to look at my phone, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw him walking toward our booth. My heart raced. "Go to the restroom," I ordered Isabella quickly. "I'll handle him." Isabella grabbed her bag and practically sprinted to the back hallway. Rollins stopped at my table. "Have you seen a woman in a gray hoodie? Short hair? Glasses?" he asked in a gravelly voice. I looked up, feigning surprise. "Is there a problem?" He squinted at me. "Wait a minute. You're Sophia Newton, Mr. Miller's ex-wife." "Future ex-wife," I corrected smoothly. "Did Mr. Miller send you to tail me?" Rollins's face tightened. "No. I'm looking for an employee who went AWOL." "Then stop interrupting my morning coffee," I said coldly. "Unless you want me to call the LAPD and report you for stalking." He hesitated, glaring at me, then turned and began checking the rest of the cafe. I immediately texted Isabella, "Leave through the back alley exit now. We'll be in touch." 5 minutes later, she replied, "I'm out. Watch out for Rollins. He's Jason's fixer." I paid and left the cafe. After driving aimlessly for 20 minutes to ensure I wasn't tailed, I headed straight to my father's office. My father was in a meeting, so I waited in his office, carefully reviewing Isabella's documents. The sheer audacity of the fraud was staggering. Jason hadn't just embezzled. He had forged my signature to leverage the plant for massive corporate loans, funneling the cash directly into Miller Holdings. So, you see the magnitude of it. My father walked in, followed by Attorney Allen, our lead counsel. "It's worse than I thought," I handed them the files. "Jason forged my signature on federal loan documents." Attorney Allen adjusted his glasses, his frown deepening with every page. "This is a slam-dunk case for wire fraud and embezzlement. We can file criminal charges, but we need the timing to be perfect." My father sat down heavily. "The Millers have deep political pockets in this city. This alone might not sink them completely. There's more." I tossed the flash drive onto the desk. "This has proof of collusion with the bank." We plugged it into a secure laptop. The emails were damning. Jason and the bank VP explicitly discussed bypassing SEC regulations. One email caught my eye. Jason mentioned he would handle the little problem with the plant, implying he was going to force me to surrender my shares. "This is phenomenal." Attorney Allen practically vibrated with excitement. "We can file an emergency injunction to freeze the plant's assets immediately." "Wait," I held up a hand. "Why do the Millers need this much cash so desperately right now?" "Dad, you mentioned they were fighting for that massive city zoning project in downtown." My father nodded. "The new South District redevelopment. The land alone is worth hundreds of millions. The Millers have already sunk massive capital into preliminary bribes and bids. If they lose the final city council vote, their cash flow will instantly rupture." A light bulb went off in my head. "So they're cannibalizing my plant to secure bridge loans to fund the South District project." "Highly likely," Allen agreed. "And time is running out. The city planning vote is in 2 weeks." I stood up and paced the room. "Then we strike the day before the vote. We let them sink every last liquid cent they have into the project. Then, we leak the financial fraud, the SEC investigates, and the banks instantly call in their loans." My father's eyes gleamed with fierce pride. "They'll face a total liquidity crisis and a federal indictment simultaneously." "It's risky," Allen warned. "If they secure the city contract first, they might get bailout funding." I shook my head. "Director Evans controls that zoning board. And he owes my dad a favor, right?" My father smirked. "Evans has owed me since the 90s. That land used to belong to his family." The trap was set. Attorney Allen would prep the legal filings. My father would handle Director Evans. I would handle public opinion. That night, I had dinner at a trendy West Hollywood spot with a group of college alumni. All of them were deeply entrenched in the local socialite scene. I dressed impeccably, a tasteful, understated dress that screamed wronged but resilient woman. "Sophia!" Emily greeted me with an exaggerated hug. "You look stunning." The other women offered sympathetic murmurs. I knew half of them were still friendly with the Millers. They would absolutely report back everything I said. That was the point. During dinner, I deliberately avoided bringing up the divorce. Only when pressed did I casually mention that Jason had simply found someone else and we were separating amicably. "Amicably?" Emily shouted on cue. "That bastard moving his 2 5-year-old mistress into your Bel Air home is amicable?" I feigned embarrassment and looked down. Well, the house is a point of contention. But I trust the courts to be fair. I heard the Millers are going to sue you, said a woman named Sandra, whose husband golfed with Jason at the country club. They say you tricked Jason into signing an extortionate settlement. I smiled sadly. He signed it of his own free will in front of witnesses. Extortionate? I opened my phone and showed the photo of Jason and Lauren drinking champagne on my patio in my robe. Isn't this what's extortionate? The photos circulated, sparking genuine gasps of outrage. I perfectly timed a subtle tear, dabbing my eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't want to bring this up. It's just 10 years. I never thought it would end like this. By the end of dinner, the narrative was firmly established. I was the dignified, heartbroken victim. Before leaving, Sandra hugged me. Sophia, if you need anything, let me know. My husband works at the DA's office. I smiled in gratitude. I knew Jason's phone would be blowing up with this gossip by midnight. He would be sweating, wondering exactly how much evidence I possessed. The next morning, Emily called me, practically screaming. Guess who invited me to grab coffee? Lauren Foster. I sat up straight. Why? She claims she wants fashion advice. But obviously Jason sent her to pump me for info. She's pretty, but she's dumb as a box of rocks. I already see right through her. Go meet her, I decided instantly. But let her lead the conversation. Drop breadcrumbs. You got it, Emily chirped. While she played spy, I focused on liquidating. The Bel Air house was solely in my name. I hired a top-tier luxury real estate agent, Mr. Peterson. $5 million cash? Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses, looking at me like I was insane. Miss Newton, this property is worth at least 6.5. If we list it properly, $5 million is fine, but it has to be a cash buyer, and we close in 7 days, I told him as we stood in the grand foyer. The buyer must have a clean background, zero ties to the Miller family. Mr. Peterson's eyes gleamed. At that price? I have a tech billionaire from Seattle who's looking for a turnkey LA pad. He can wire the funds tomorrow. Perfect. Later that afternoon, I was packing my final boxes when my phone buzzed. It was Emily. Sophia, it was hilarious. Lauren kept trying to subtly ask if you were digging into the company's books. I casually mentioned you hired some forensic accountant named Mark Evans, and her eyes bugged out. Emily, that's dangerous. If Jason figures out Isabella is helping me. Relax. I gave her a fake name on purpose. I said Evans, not Taylor. But Sophia, she bragged that Jason is taking her to Paris to buy a massive engagement ring as soon as your divorce is final. Sure he is, I sneered. She's in for a rude awakening. I hung up and continued packing. In the back of Jason's old desk drawer, I found an old, encrypted hard drive he had left behind months ago. Curiosity getting the better of me, I plugged it into my MacBook. It asked for a password. I tried his usual ones, nothing. Then, on a hunch, I typed in Lauren Foster's birth date. Access granted. Inside was a folder labeled South District Zoning. I opened it. It contained topographical maps and city permits. But then I found an Excel sheet titled Eminent Domain Disbursements. I skimmed it, and my breath caught. The amounts paid to the displaced residents were millions of dollars lower than the numbers reported to the city. The massive difference was being funneled into a consulting firm called Southwind LLC. I took screenshots immediately. This was hard proof the Millers were embezzling city relocation funds. If this leaked, they wouldn't just lose the project. They'd face federal RICO charges. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Through the camera, I saw my mother-in-law, flanked by 2 massive men in suits. I took a deep breath and hit the intercom. Mrs. Miller, can I help you? Open the door, she barked. I'm afraid I can't do that, I said politely. If you're here for Jason's things, the movers will handle it next week, as stated in the agreement. Her face turned beet red. Sophia, how dare you try to sell our family home? Who gave you the right? Word travels fast in Bel Air. The deed gives me the right. It is my private property. Liar! Jason paid for everything, she screamed, pounding on the heavy oak door. I slipped a manila envelope under the door sweep. Here is a copy of the deed and the original wire transfer from my father. The house was purchased in full prior to the marriage. Any renovations paid from joint accounts are considered marital funds, which are currently being divided in court. Any other questions? There was silence on the other side as she snatched the papers. I watched her face drain of color. You, she stammered. You planned this from the start. You conned my son to steal our wealth. Mrs. Miller, I said smoothly, weren't you the one who pushed so hard for this marriage? Claiming the Solaria heiress was the only woman fit for your son? It's highly ironic you're accusing me of a long con now. Furious, she turned to the bodyguards. Break the door down. I pulled out my phone. I am dialing 911. Do you really want to catch a breaking and entering charge in Bel Air? The bodyguards hesitated. One muttered something to her. She glared at the camera. Sophia, you will pay for this. This isn't over. As I watched them retreat, my heart hammered. The Millers were panicking. The next morning, I met Isabella at the Blue Bottle again. She was disguised in a baseball cap and a surgical mask. I've officially resigned, citing medical reasons, she whispered, sliding another massive file across the table. These are the final, unredacted corporate tax returns. They've hidden over $80 million in revenue to evade taxes. Furthermore, they've bribed at least 5 city officials for the South District project, including Lauren's father. She played a voice memo on her phone. Jason's voice. Wire the 20 mil to the offshore account in the Caymans. Wash it through the art auction house. Just like last time. This is from 3 months ago, Isabella said. I recorded it to protect myself. You're a lifesaver, I squeezed her hand. Are you safe? I have a flight to Singapore tonight. I'll stay there until the dust settles. We parted ways. Later that afternoon, the Seattle tech billionaire, Mr. Wang, signed the paperwork. $5 million cleared into my private account immediately. I drove straight to Attorney Allen's office. We spent 3 hours organizing Isabella's evidence and the hard drive data I found. This is a nuclear bomb, Allen said, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. We filed the injunction to freeze Jason's personal assets tomorrow morning. Once he's locked out of his cash, we drop the evidence to the feds. There's one more thing, Allen said, handing me the decrypted file regarding the old car crash that killed Mr. Sterling. Our forensic tech cracked the deep encrypted folder. It details the exact payout your father-in-law made to the LAPD investigator who ruled it an accident, and the wire transfer to the mechanic who cut Sterling's brake lines. My blood ran ice cold. My father was right. They were murderers. Hold on to this, I whispered. We dropped this at the absolute final moment. The next morning, the financial guillotine fell. I stood in the lobby of the IRS building in downtown LA, handing a massive dossier to a senior investigator. I then went to the SEC regional office and filed formal whistleblower complaints regarding the wire fraud and insider trading. Finally, I dropped the bribery evidence at the district attorney's office. By 2 p.m., I was sitting in Emily's high-end boutique, sipping sparkling water. Her TV was tuned to CNBC. Suddenly, a breaking news banner flashed across the screen in bright red. Breaking. SEC and FBI raid Miller Holdings HQ. CEO Jason Miller, investigated for massive corporate fraud. Emily and I stared at the screen. Jaws dropped. The camera cut to the Miller building. FBI agents in windbreakers were carrying out boxes of hard drives. A reporter spoke over the footage. Miller Holdings stock has cratered this afternoon, halting trading. Rumors are swirling that CEO Jason Miller is implicated in massive tax evasion, bribery, and wire fraud. My phone exploded. Texts from my dad, Attorney Allen, college friends, but one text stood out, from an unknown number. Sophia, you are ruthless. You will pay for this. Jason. I deleted the message. I felt no euphoria, just a strange, heavy finality. 10 years of marriage, 2 years of suffering. Finally balanced. That night my dad called. His voice was gravelly. Sophia, your father-in-law just suffered a massive widowmaker heart attack. He's at Cedars-Sinai in critical condition. I froze. What? The news broke him. The stock collapsed. The banks are recalling their loans instantly. They're ruined. Dad, did I go too far? I whispered. Don't be ridiculous, my father snapped. The business world is a blood sport. The Millers built their empire on fraud and blood. This is karma. You simply handed over the truth. Do not feel guilty. I knew he was right, but it still weighed on me. The next morning, the news hit. Mr. Miller had passed away at 3:17 a.m. The Miller empire was effectively dead. Jason was formally indicted and had his passport confiscated. Lauren Foster, predictably, vanished. Emily told me she caught a one-way flight to Hong Kong. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Jason. "We need to talk," he rasped. "I'm at the Starbucks across from your new apartment." I went down. He was sitting in the corner, and I barely recognized him. He looked like he had aged 20 years. His designer suit was wrinkled. He had a thick, unkempt beard. The arrogant prince of LA real estate was gone. "Thank you for coming," he whispered, staring into his coffee. "I don't know where to begin." "You have 5 minutes," I said coldly. Jason looked up, tears in his bloodshot eyes. "Sophia, I'm sorry. I was a monster. But the company is bankrupt. My father is dead. I'm facing federal prison. Please, show some mercy. Tell the DA you fabricated the evidence out of spite. I'll do whatever you want." I let out a harsh laugh. "Do you think the DOJ is playing a game? Do you want me to commit perjury and go to federal prison for you? Sophia, please. For the 10 years we were married, you didn't care about those 10 years when you were sleeping with a 5-year-old and calling me an old hag." I cut him off. "I was wrong. I love you. I've always loved you," he begged, his voice cracking. I stood up, feeling nothing but profound pity and disgust. "You only love yourself, Jason. You're only sorry because you got caught. Reaping what you sow is a painful thing. Isn't it?" I walked out, leaving him sobbing into his hands. That evening, I received an encrypted message. "It's Lauren. I have hard proof of Jason's offshore accounts and recordings of him ordering the bribes. Meet me at the Beverly Wilshire." I met her in the hotel lobby. She was wearing massive sunglasses, sporting a nasty bruise on her cheekbone. "He hit me when he found out I was leaving," she mumbled, sliding a flash drive across the table. "I want $5 million for this, and you get the DA to give my dad a plea deal." I looked at her, utterly unimpressed. "I can't control the DA. And I'll give you $500,000. Take it or leave it." She panicked. "That's not enough. It's $500,000 more than Jason will give you before he goes to prison." I stood up. She grabbed my wrist. "Fine. Deal." I wrote her the check. As I walked away, I handed the flash drive to Attorney Allen, who was waiting nearby. "Verify it. Then, give it to the feds." The divorce hearing was a bloodbath. Jason stood in court looking like a ghost. His lawyer tried to argue the settlement was signed under duress, but Attorney Allen played the video of Jason arrogantly signing the papers without reading them. The judge ruled instantly. The Bel Air house and its proceeds were mine. Jason was ordered to repay the $3 million he embezzled from our joint accounts, plus heavy punitive damages. As we left the courthouse, paparazzi swarmed us. Jason fled to a waiting car, covering his face. I stood tall before the cameras. The justice system worked today. I look forward to starting a new chapter of my life. That night, Jason's sister, Anna, called me, sobbing hysterically. She begged me to drop the civil suits, offering to surrender everything if I just left them enough to survive. I agreed, on the condition that they sign over the remaining shares of my family's textile plant and never appeal the divorce. She signed the paperwork the next day. A month later, cornered by overwhelming federal evidence, including the murder file I finally handed over, Jason took a plea deal. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The Miller Group was liquidated entirely. 1 year later, the California sun was brilliant. I stood in front of the newly rebuilt Solaria textile plant. Using the $5 million from the Bel Air house sale, I had purchased state-of-the-art machinery and revived my family's legacy. My father stood beside me, cutting the ribbon. "This isn't just a grand opening," he told the cheering crowd. "This is proof that resilience always wins." Isabella, back from Singapore and now my personal wealth manager, handed me a glass of champagne. Emily hugged me from the side. I had also launched a legal defense fund for women trapped in financially abusive marriages. Later that month, I attended my college reunion at a swanky rooftop bar in West Hollywood. I wore a stunning red dress, radiating confidence. I was no longer a victim. I was a CEO. Jason had been temporarily transferred to a lower security facility, pending some cooperating testimony, but he obviously wasn't at the reunion. He was a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered about over cocktails. As I stood looking out over the glittering Los Angeles skyline, Emily bumped her shoulder against mine. "If you could go back in time, would you marry him again?" I smiled, taking a sip of my drink. "Yes." "Are you insane?" she gasped. "No. Because the pain forced me to wake up. It forged me into who I am today. Independent, untouchable." I looked at the city lights. The storm was over. Tomorrow was a new day, and for the first time in my life, I was the one writing the story.